Okay, so I just finished Act 2 of Season 2 of Arcane live on stream. Watched all 3 episodes that just dropped today. I have so many thoughts about these 3 episodes. I'm doing this the same as the first act video. People seem to enjoy that one, so I'm doing the stream of consciousness. I'm going over everything I thought about these 3 episodes. Now again, keep in mind, if you haven't seen that first review video that I did, I am not a League of Legends player. I do not know these characters within the context of the video game. I know these characters within the context of Arcane, and my only other experience with these characters is watching like some of the character cinematics. I did a full video where I reacted to every character cinematic about 2 years ago. And I actually just watched the Mbessa character cinematic a little while ago as well, right after we finished the first 3 episodes of this season in Act 1. Okay. Do I start with overall thoughts or do I start with like character thoughts? First and foremost, I'll just start by saying this. The show is incredible. The show is like absolutely amazing. I wish this show was going for like 5 or 6 seasons. So the fact that so much of the amazing stuff in these 3 episodes is rushed through so quickly, like, makes me upset, because normally if you guys watch my One Piece content or any of my other content about any other bit and piece of entertainment, you know I am a stickler for pacing. And I brought up in my review video for Act 1 just how good the pacing was in those first 3 episodes. We were getting action, we were getting storytelling, and I think for the most part, despite the fact that there are all these different plot threads that are going on, it was relatively clear what was happening. By the beginning of episode 6 of this season of Arcane, half of it, I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm trying to follow it. I don't know what's going on. I feel like it was to the detriment of this show to try to squeeze in all this stuff with the Black Rose. That is my initial impression right now. I feel like that is to the detriment of all of the absolutely amazing stuff that is in this season. And that's not to say that I'm not interested in that. I'm actually very interested in that. I like Mbessa as a character. I'm interested to know what's going on with Mel and those latent powers that she has. Very clearly, whatever power she does have, whatever witch power or Noxian power, I don't know what it is. Clearly, that's what saved them from the nuke at the very beginning of the season, right? Right in that first episode, you see that circle around her and Jace, and very clearly, Mel did something to save them. So she's activated that power before, but now through this weird, like, Black Rose containment chamber thing where she was seeing, like, a vision of her brother, she's clearly activating it. But I almost feel like I could be wrong, right? I'm watching this and recording this video and talking about all this the day that it dropped. So next week, I could be totally wrong. But I don't see a world with all the plot threads that we had here and the things that are clearly important that we're going to need to find out before the end of the season, the end of the series. In fact, I was going to say end of the season, end of the series. I don't know how we get a reasonable explanation for all of that. I feel like this 3-episode chunk of, season 2 of Arcane could have absolutely benefited from the Black Rose stuff not being there, because all of this stuff with Caitlyn and Vi and Warwick and Isha and that flashback, that amazing flashback in episode 5 and the animation and all the stuff with Victor and his cult in episode 6 and the end of episode 5, like, I'm actually really bummed that we did not spend more time with those characters. That environment in particular, Victor's like psychedelic mushroom cult area, was unbelievably gorgeous. Like all the rainbow stained glass and the hummingbirds flying around. They really made it look like a utopia, which is what you're supposed to feel, right? That like, look at all the good that this hex tech is doing. It's saving these people who couldn't walk and saving these people who had other issues. And now they all have fresh food and little fuzzy fruits. And even Warwick is getting healed. Again, I'm going right into it, right? This is stream of consciousness about everything in these episodes. So I'll get back to the stuff with Warwick in episode 4 and all that stuff. We'll get there. But like, all of that, I feel like the time that we spent in Victor's little cult land could have easily been like an entire season within itself. And so I understand that the budget for the show is like insane and they can't keep this going for like 4, 5, or 6 seasons. But I do feel like that entire chunk felt very rushed, especially in comparison to episode 4, right? Episode 4, the majority of the beginning of that episode was very slow paced. You get a little character development stuff with Jinx. Not really, I wouldn't even call it development. I hesitate to call that because it really is just stuff that we kind of already knew about her, right? Her internal struggles. We get the stuff with Vi as well, the stuff with Caitlyn, which, by the way, Caitlyn, I was on a roller coaster with that character during these 3 episodes, because that first 3 minutes of episode 4, you see her with Maddie, and you're like, bruh, did Vi mean nothing to you? What is this? What is this? And then you even get that scene with Mbessa where she walks in afterwards, and they're about to discuss her duties as commander. And she's like, wow, you've been hanging around here a lot, Maddie. I'm like, what have you been doing? Vi hasn't been gone that long, Caitlin. What's happening? You got the kiss in episode 3, and then now you're throwing that stuff out the window. Thankfully, she redeems herself by episode 6, where she's working with Vi to hold down Mbessa and hold down Singed and stuff. But bro, again, roller coaster of emotions with that character. But again, while we're on the topic of Caitlin, this goes back to my first point within this video, which is that, again, that setup at the end of episode 3, where you see her rise to the new status and Mbessa's behind her and they're all doing the war chant, you're like, oh, she's gonna do something major. And then I feel like Caitlin kind of does nothing during these 3 episodes. I mean, she does stuff, but she's absolutely sidelined to the main plot. The main plot of these 3 episodes, without a shadow of a doubt, is Vi, Caitlin, Warwick, and Isha. Like, that is the main through line through all 3 of these episodes. And again, I feel like because of how much it was set up with Caitlin at the end of episode 3 of the first act, I was just like expecting more with her and that we'd get to spend more time with her. Honestly, I wish we could have gotten more time to spend with all of these characters together. I think that's another big reason why episode 5 and episode 6 really worked with me, especially episode 6. Having all of these different League of Legends champions, who again, I only know from this show and like various cinematics. Even with that little bit of backstory that I have watching this, I was so hyped to see like Jinx and Vi and Singed and Mbessa and Warwick and all these characters all in the exact same place, right? It's just cool to see them interacting with each other, and Victor, and then Punish Jace showing up at the end of all of it. Like, we could have easily had 3 or 4 episodes there and I would have been perfectly happy. And I feel like, again, the pacing in those first 3 episodes was really good. And so to kind of grind it to a halt and spend so much time on stuff that we kind of already knew at the beginning of Act 4, or at the beginning of episode 4, I'm sorry, I keep calling it Act 4, you guys know what I mean. But like, we spent a lot of time there with the stuff with Jinx and with Isha. And I think on one hand, my assumption is the reason why they did that is because you obviously need the build up for that moment where you really feel something when Isha sacrifices herself in episode 6. However, and you can go watch my reactions to this, any of you who are members at the Nakama tier or up, or tier 2s over on Twitch, you can go watch my reaction right now. It's literally already up in the members drive. I said in like episode 3, actually, even back in Act 1, I was like, oh, that kid's definitely gonna die. They're setting up this kid to die, right? And this is gonna be the thing that even though Jinx is making all this progression and she's finally kind of coming back to her own, she's working with her sister again, she's gonna lose it again after this kid ends up dying and we get Jinx 2.0. And I thought that was going to happen, honestly, in episode 4 with the prison break, where you have all of them running through the prison and you see Warwick. I'm thinking, uh-oh, this kid's going to stand in the way. Jinx isn't going to be able to stop him. And then she's going to come to the realization, oh my God, that's my dad, right? So I'm glad that it didn't happen in that way. But I do think like Isha's death was extremely predictable to me. As somebody who watches a lot of anime and watches a lot of shows like this, like, par for the course, the death flags were waving for that kid. But I did not expect it to wrap up in the way that it did in episode 6. And my point, once again, is that I think the setup for it, there was like a lot of setup for it in episode 4, and a lot of flags were waving, the death flags were waving, and there was a lot of time spent with her. But realistically, we kind of already like knew that. We already knew that Jinx was, you know, like a mother figure to this kid, essentially. We knew all of this, so I didn't really need to see more of something that I already knew when there's so many questions and things being thrown at me that I actually do need explanations for. For example, all the stuff with the Hex Tech. I am 110% lost, and I know there's gonna be people out there that are like, well, go watch this lore video about it. I don't care. I'm not gonna go watch a League of Legends 2.5 hour long lore video explaining what the Hex Tech thing is. That is the job of the show, and me watching this show as somebody who has no familiarity with the rest of it, just watching the show, enjoying it as it is, to have some type of inclination about what this stuff is about, right? Like, when you get Victor, and mind you, this scene was amazing. At the end of episode 5, where you get that scene with Jace talking with Sallow, who's now been healed by Victor, right? Sallow was taking all those drugs for his legs with the Shimmer and the other spy girl, and then Victor is like taking over his mind, and his eyes roll back, and then he's Sallow again, like, and then that entire sequence obviously culminating with Jace being like, I can't let you leave the room. Sallow's like, I'm sorry to hear that. And then bam, him bringing the hammer down on him. Amazing. That entire sequence was amazing. But on the other hand, I'm sitting there like, okay, but what does any of this mean? Like, you're getting flashes of this potential future that Jace has seen. I'm not sure if it's a person or a thing or the future. I don't know what's going on, right? But Jace has seen something and he's like, all right, we got to stop this right now. Otherwise things are going to go to hell. But Victor, I'm assuming being one with the Hex Core, also knows that, right? Like we have all these people that are following Victor's cult, if you want to call it a cult, but really he's just going around healing people of their illnesses. But the thing that I came to realize by the end of episode 6, which I really feel like should have been a little more hammered on the head, no pun intended, is like when Victor dies, if I'm understanding this correctly, and my comments can correct me, when Victor dies, all the good that he's done goes away, right? You get that moment where Jace ends up, shooting him. You get that hole through Victor. He falls to the ground, and then all of a sudden, all the other people that he's healed, they start screaming, and you could see all of their energy like evaporating out of this. And obviously, Warwick goes crazy, and that eventually leads to Isha's death, right? That was going to happen eventually. And I'm assuming that Victor knew that, right? Because he was one with the Hex Core, Hex Tech thing, right? He's like the nexus point. So he should have known all of that through communicating with it and known, okay, what I'm doing here is obviously helping people, but at the same time, like when it all goes away. And Singed has that little conversation with him where they're in like the greenhouse with Warwick, and he's discussing about like, hey, your power is dwindling now. Like you can feel it, can't you? Like you've already been doing all these things. You're overexerting yourself. Like you really shouldn't be doing this. We gotta make good of this situation while we still can, get rid of him, fix you, and then everything will be hunky-dory. And obviously that's not what ends up happening, and everything goes to shit at the end of episode 6. But again, I feel like had more time been spent with that plot line, I would have understood it, I guess, a little bit more, because it felt very rushed and very frantic, which again, I was enjoying myself. This is not a slight against the show. Like, I still love the show just as much as I loved it in season 1 and just as much as I loved it in those first 3 episodes in Act 1. But again, I feel like this is to the detriment of the show overall that so much of this got rushed to the very ending. And I'm almost wondering, like I said in the very beginning of this video, if the Black Rose stuff wasn't there, if that would have helped anything at all. Because you obviously do need Mbessa, and you need to understand somewhat her motivation for doing all of this and understanding that family is everything, right? She's going to do anything for her kids. And then even that paralleling with Singed, right? And the two of them finally understanding each other too, when you get that backstory with Singed about his daughter, I'm assuming that was his daughter, right? Who's like dead in the thing and he's trying to cheat death, and you get the little thing with the ballerina. I will say, brief side note, again, stream of consciousness going all over the place. Brief side note, I did not get like half of the references in these episodes. Because again, I'm not somebody who plays League, but I can see just from the excitement in my live chat, like how much that Singed retcon meant to people and the stuff with the ballerina, or how much like having Warwick's lullaby and Warwick's theme playing during that prison break at the end, how cool that was to have that moment. Or like that moment when Victor says glorious evolution, right? My whole chat erupted into glorious evolution, like all caps. I didn't know what it meant, but clearly it's like a tie-in to something that's said in the game, right? There were a lot of moments like that here, but again, a good thing about Arcane that I mentioned in my previous video is that none of those Easter eggs, like, they didn't take me out of the story. They didn't stop to go, remember this from the game, remember? Like, it was just naturally part of the dialogue. And I think Arcane's always been very, very good at that, where instead of just stopping to go, okay, we want you to see this thing that we're referencing, check this out, make sure you don't miss this. It's just naturally part of it, and the people who get it, and the people who don't. And it did not affect negatively my enjoyment of the show whatsoever, that I didn't understand those Easter eggs. So on that front as well, very well done. But going back to the stuff with Jason Victor and stuff, I just needed more time with those two characters. Because at first, and again, you can go back and watch my reaction, I was like, Jace, what are you doing? Why are you randomly killing him? Why are you trying to kill him when he's healing all these people? Like, I feel like we needed to at least see more than just like a glimpse of whatever that robot thing was with the Infinity Gauntlet stones in it or whatever. We needed something more for us to understand Jace's motivation for all of this, especially after the beginning of episode 6, where you see Sky is just like chilling, like their assistant friend is just chilling inside of the Hex Tech, whatever, special magic world that Victor was inhabiting right after Sallow died, and he's, communicating with all these other people and talking to her and like trying to figure out exactly what this power is that he has. It's just, it was all a little too confusing, and I think it wouldn't have been confusing had we spent more time with those characters and that stuff was a little more fleshed out. But with all that being said, I think, again, The crux of these 3 episodes is that relationship between Vi and Jinx and Vander, now Warwick, right? And I saw a bunch of people in my chat saying like, well, how did you know it was Warwick? Because I had said in like episode 4, I'm like, oh, here we go, Warwick's coming. And they were like, how'd you know that that was Vander? I'm like, dude, I've known since season 1, episode 3 of this show, even as somebody who's a very light fan of the League of Legends lore. When they call him the Hound of the Underground, you're like, well, I know who that guy's going to be, So that wasn't that huge of a shock to me. What was a huge shock to me was the way that their relationship was handled in these episodes. In particular, that moment in episode 5, which I think is the best of the bunch. Episode 6 has a lot of amazing moments and tearjerker moments and stuff too. And episode 4, the ending and the stuff in the prison was cool. But really, I think episode 5 overall was like the best of the bunch, because you get those little sibling type interactions, right, between Jinx and Vi, where they're sort of fighting with each other. Vi's now completely decked out in her like goth underground tournament gear or whatever, and also her jacket has little wolves on the back, which I thought was a kind of nice touch. But you have the two of them fighting like actual siblings would fight, and when you get that moment where Jinx is like, you have to believe me, and then Vi's like, I'm just gonna hope and pray that she's right here, and she screams Vander, and it boom, cuts immediately into that backstory where you see their mother talking with Vander and Silco. With the blisters and bedrock thing, like, oh, so unbelievably good. And again, I need to highlight, I said this back in Act 1's video, but I'm going to highlight it again here. The animation and the detail and the mix of different animation types in this show is just unbelievable. There was that moment in the beginning of episode 6, I believe, where it went watercolor and you were getting like the memories of Vander and his time with Vi and his time with Jinx when they were kids. So good. And that moment, right when you got Rictus and he's about to kill them and he's like, stay away from my daughter, and he actually speaks for the first time, like beyond just saying powder. Oh, it made it all the more heart-wrenching when you get that moment towards the ending where he's like bleeding out lava and all of Victor's work is being undone, and you got little Isha running through the crowd looking back at Jinx like, hey, thanks for giving me a somewhat decent life in my last few days, and then shooting up at him. Oh my gosh, dude. Unbelievable. That entire sequence was just so good. And again, something I mentioned back in my Act 1 review that stands out here as well too is like the use of tableaus. Knowing when to take the time to stop the shot to show us something cool. Despite the frantic pacing of the story, I feel like the actual action wasn't all that frantic in these 3 episodes, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like what you're seeing on screen isn't frantic. It's like everything surrounding the story that seemed rushed and frantic to me. And I am very curious to see where these last 3 episodes are going. Somebody in my live chat during these reactions told me that the last episode is actually going to be like an hour and a half long. It needs to be. I feel like to, again, give us more information about the stuff with the Black Rose, to give us more time with these characters together. You get that little bit in the preview with Jinx and with Vi. Not Jinx. It wasn't Jinx, excuse me. I misspoke. It was Vi and Caitlyn and Jace and Mel, right? Where they're all around the table and trying to figure out what to do. And now you've got this all-out war breaking out and Mbessa's attacking and Singed is going. But again, at this point, I am curious of motivations. I'm like, things have just devolved into like all-out war. We don't really see Jinx there at all. Obviously, Jinx is going to be up to her own antics as well. You've got to wrap up that character. And now that they're actually willing to like kill major characters, like by the end of episode 6, this is wild, but by the end of episode 6, Warwick and Victor are both dead. They're both dead. So like, if they're killing off major champions, which I assumed were going to be the only characters that were safe, what does that mean for everybody else? Could this series end with Jinx dying? Could this end with Jace dying? Like, what? I don't know. Could this end with Mbessa dying? That would be wild. You introduce a character, finally throw her in the game, and then all of a sudden you're like, actually, well, let's pull her out of this. I doubt it, because again, it feels like stuff they're setting up for future seasons, but good Lord. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Again, roller coaster of emotions over the course of these 3 most recent episodes. If you haven't already watched them and you were watching this video, you made a huge mistake. You should have watched those 3 episodes first, because they were so unbelievably good. And I am dying to see how all of this is going to wrap up next week. Again, I'm hoping and praying that final episode is going to be extended, because there are just too many things left over. And again, the stuff with Victor and explaining the Hex Tech and where Heimerdinger and Echo are, like, I gotta know what's going on here. I gotta know. I gotta know what the ultimate fate is of Caitlyn and Vi and Jinx and everybody. I gotta know if Caitlyn and Vi are officially gonna be back together again by the end of all of this. Because again, they're working together at the end of episode 6. but just incredible. The music, incredible. The animation, incredible. The story, great, albeit a little frantic and a little rushed during these 3 episodes, but I'm still fully engaged. I just feel like, you know, I know a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, are going to say, go watch lore videos and understand it. I feel like I shouldn't need to. As a casual viewer of the show and somebody who's not played League, I feel like I don't necessarily need to go watch a bunch of lore videos to understand something. That should be the job of the show, to teach people who are just watching the show, you know, what all of this stuff is, and not making it super duper confusing and having all these other plot lines, you know, weaving between each other. Again, not to say that I didn't love the way that the plot lines were weaving into each other, but again, it just felt a little frantic and a little rushed, especially compared to those first 3 episodes of this season, which had like unbelievable pacing. I wish we would have spent more time with Warwick, because you have this whole hype around that character and finally seeing this character, and they finally get to him by the end of Act 5. Vi and Jinx and him, they're all together again. You have that moment in episode 6 where he's talking and then nothing, and now he's gone. And it's like, I just wish there was a little more time spent with those characters, even if there was like a filler episode. I can't believe I'm asking for a filler episode. Even if there was like a filler episode in Victor's little cult land with the little psychedelic mushroom huts and everything, like, and then by the grave, and the beautiful scenery in that area too. It's just like, I wish we had one more episode there. If it was just character interactions, that would have been fine to me. Because again, I feel like you had all this lead up to the stuff with Warwick, only for it to be taken away super quickly, which again is very bold of them. It's a super bold choice as storytellers to do that. Is it the right choice? We're going to wait and see, right? We're going to find out next week if that was the right choice to rush some of this stuff to lead to the last 3 episodes. But overall, obviously, I'm still having an amazing time with the show. And I am dying to hear your guys' thoughts on these 3 episodes in the comments. I saw a lot of people saying they were welling up and tearing up during certain moments. Again, I don't have the same ties to these characters because I don't play League. But even as somebody who was watching Arcane, there were definitely a few moments where I felt like I was almost choking up when you get the reunions between, you know, some of these characters and some of their interactions. It was awesome. But again, let me know what you thought of these 3 episodes down in the comments below. Like, comment, subscribe, and again, reminder to people, the reactions are available for members at the Nakama tier and up here on the YouTube channel, and I will be live again next week on Twitch. So if you missed my live reactions while they were live to the public for everybody this morning, make sure you are following me on Twitch, because I will be doing my reactions to the last 3 episodes next Saturday as well, live on stream there. So thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, I'll talk to you guys later. Nakama!